Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Meyer, and in this video what we're going to be doing is creating a sub bass in Vital to sit underneath the kick drum when the kick drum is playing. So this is what the sub bass sounds like in context. And by itself. All right, so to get started, I think what I'm going to do is, we haven't really mixed these too much, but I'm going to bring these both down -3 dB. So this will go from -3 to -6, and this will go from -7 to -10. And what I want to do is add in that sub bass to come in really at this point. And when this happens, we're going to not have the sub pad playing, and instead we're going to be doing that sub bass. So you can hear it kind of building up. Sounds good. So what I'm going to do is just bring this down here and rename this sub bass like so. We're going to give it the same color. And to really make sure we're doing this the same way, what I'm going to do first is make sure all these notes are about the same length. So I basically need to do this and do this like this. And now from here, we can just basically shorten each of these here in the sub bass MIDI to basically be doing offbeats. Now, you generally have two options. Your first option is just standard offbeats like this. The other is double offbeats, which were if you were to take this and just basically do something like this. But I find for most of the time I like having this solid offbeat. It may not be as punchy, but it helps the low end sustain a little bit more, and it hits a bit harder when you're on a club style system in my experience. So I tend to prefer that. Sometimes I will use a double offbeat or something, but usually these first two 16th notes are taken up by the kick drum, and then you have your next two 16ths either playing 16ths or an 8th note like this, where it takes up half of that space. So let's go ahead and solo this, and we're just going to go ahead and create this simple sub bass. Now, if you're listening to this on computer headphones, something like that, you may not hear it. But you should be able to feel it. If you're listening it on headphones or have a subwoofer, then maybe you should be able to hear it. And I'm putting an EQ on here so I can look and see what frequencies I'm playing. Now, I know from doing the sub pad where I need to go with this. I just need to go down an octave, but it's still helpful to do it this way. So we're going to take our basic shapes, and I'm going to select the sawtooth wave like this. And we're going to just jump. Let's see what this looks like. So definitely needs to come down. You can hold down Shift, click and drag, and it'll jump by octaves. And it's a very bright sound. So because this is going to be mainly a sub bass, we're going to turn this into a low pass filter and then just bring it around maybe 200 or so hertz. Sometimes you can bring it up a little bit more. Add a little bit of drive. And what you really want to do with this amplitude envelope, you want to give it a little bit of attack and a little bit of release. If you don't, you can get these clicks, which is not good. Not good. So we'll add a hair of attack and a hair of release just to make sure that we don't get any of that. And then what's also important, I like, is turning this phase off. So we don't want any phase. Well, this doesn't matter. You can have this start. But what really matters is the phase randomization. You want every note re-triggering the same. So making sure this is 0 is going to stop it from re-triggering at different points. And I like it restarting at this point in the wave because you won't get any of those clicks. Whereas if you started it at 180, you would get a click. Now, some people like that, and that's okay, but I tend to not like that. Cool. And what I'm going to do is add in a sine wave oscillator. So what I'm going to do is go into my basic shapes again and choose the sine wave. And what this is going to do is just boost the fundamental. Now, this is really important that you have the phase randomization set correctly, because what can happen here is you can end up canceling the fundamental that you're trying to actually boost. So this phase, we're going to play around with this phase, and we're also going to play with the volume. And this is just going to really boost that first harmonic. Notice how as I increase the phase, I'm actually phase canceling it out. So we're going to keep it at 0 and bring this down just a hair. I don't know if you can hear that, but to me it really does make a difference. So I like the way that sounds. I am going to bring the voices down to 1. It doesn't matter because you should never be playing this polyphonically, but it does, you know, I just do this just to make sure. And just moving on to the effects is we're going to keep this really simple. Just a little bit of soft clip distortion to add some just sort of warmth to it. And this can add a little bit of harmonics, so you may or may not want to filter it. I don't think it needs that filter, so I'm just going to keep it off. And here we go. We can hear this in context. We want to go ahead and mix this in. Now, I like doing this before adding the kick because I find it much easier to find a kick that works well with your sub bass than the other way around. But of course, it's up to you which one you like. So let's take a listen. Sounding pretty good. The next thing we need to do is get a kick. I'm just going to do it because that's when you're going to hear it. You know, it doesn't make sense to hear it like this without having a kick. So we're going to add a MIDI track, and I'm going to go ahead and find simpler. I like using, you can use sampler as well, but just to keep it simple, we'll do this, and I'm going to set this to, I guess one-shot mode is fine. We can see how we want to do this. Actually, I am going to do classic, because this way we can play around with these controls here. So set this to one voice, and let's just go ahead and find a kick. I've organized my samples so you can find something maybe in this first ReOrder pack. That sounds good. So like this, and then we just need to go in here and basically pencil this in how we would like it. And the length of these kicks is really important. We don't want them so long that they're overextending. So what I'm going to do is start with them basically being eighth notes, and I don't want any of this stuff going on. But what I am going to do is look at the combination of these on an oscilloscope. So this here is the kick, and this is going to be the sort of kick and bass bus. So I don't know, I like giving that a color, and let's just make sure everything has the right color and everything. I'm pretty particular about this. And we'll look at LFO tool. I mean, you can really use whatever you want to use for an oscilloscope. I'm just so used to doing this, and I'm going to put this on the kick and bass bus, but what I'm going to do is turn the depth to 0 and put all this stuff down so we can just take a look at what's going on, because sometimes what can happen is you can end up eating up your headroom because your kick and sub bass are fighting in the mix. So once again, you want to be mixing with your ears and not your eyes, but this can help identify problems that'll show up later. Okay, so we immediately know we need to turn this up. Actually, kick is probably too loud. It's actually looking pretty good. Notice here how we have this release. The decay doesn't matter because, of course, we're using the sustain anyway. So sustain is all the way up, and then I'm basically adding a little bit of release, and then we can control the length of the kick with this release knob. There are other ways you can do this. That does sound pretty good. If you did set this to one-shot mode, you could, for instance, decide to do it this way and add some fade out, which can help, But honestly, the way this sounds like this with the release and the sustain, just because of the way it is, it sounds good. So it has about a 50 or 60 millisecond overlap with the next note. And one of the things you can sometimes do is you can actually look at how many, sometimes it'll tell you down here at the bottom actually, oh, oops, what my selection, oops, there it is, 109 milliseconds would be each 16th note at this particular, at that particular point, it'd be 109. So it's just blending over about half of a 16th note into where the sub bass is playing. That's fine. What I'm looking for here, what I don't want to see, are these huge spikes or peaks. Now sometimes you can go into the synthesizer here and actually adjust the phase of both of these. This would be this one and this one, to just make sure that they're bang on with the kick. But honestly, you do that and then the note changes and you're off to the next one. So let's take a look at this as these two change and make sure we're not running into any issues. I don't think we're going to, but it's just worth looking at. And what I just realized is I accidentally moved the pitch on this pitch wheel. So we just want to go ahead and make sure we're not doing this. So I can do this going into envelopes. Should be MIDI controlled pitch bend. Just make sure this is at 0 so we're not. Awesome, that sounds good. In the next video, we'll look at making a mid bass. See you then.